Now, this broken leg of mine has interfered with my fishing this summer. And so I have to tell you a fish story from last year. Have you ever seen the TV show Deadliest Catch? A few people are nodding. Well, it's the strangest reality show because it actually is real. The film crew follows 6 or 8 crab fishing boats as they fight against time and Mother Nature to bring up king crabs from the deep Arctic waters off Alaska. Crashing waves, freezing temperatures, and days and nights without sleep make this crab fishing what is said to be the deadliest job on the planet. You are 90 times more likely to die as an Alaskan crab fisherman than as a normal worker. No other occupation comes even close. Last summer I went to Alaska, but not to fish for crabs. That happens in the winter. I went there to fish, for salmon and halibut and other ocean fish. And we borrowed the boat of my brother's friend, Captain Tom. Tom's son was one of those fishing fatalities just a few years ago when he was washed off the deck in the middle of the night and never found. Tom works a desk job now. But he let us take the boat out fishing. And I had never driven a boat so big. But the seas were calm and the fish were jumping. I steered the boat out there into the harbor, and we began to let out lines and chased after the beautiful salmon that we saw ahead of us. But nothing would bite. We chased those crazy fish all morning, but the only thing that came up was my breakfast. I don't do so well on boats. Finally, we called Captain Tom at work. Help, we can't catch a thing. He suggested that we fish for halibut off the bottom. So we stopped what we were doing, shut off the engines, and simply drifted along. And soon we hauled up several fish the size of garbage can lids. If we hadn't stopped doing things my way and started listening to Tom, we would have come home empty-handed. Instead, we caught fish. And the next day, my group went out with the real captain in the boat and came home with over 300 pounds of fish in one day's catch. So what does this have to do with God or Jesus or you? Well, I think there's a lesson in the story. Empty nets can lead us to the help that we need. It is our very failure to catch fish on our own that leads us to listen to the real captain. If our nets hadn't been empty, we might not have made the call. Thank God for empty nets. Thank God for our failures. Our Bible story today is about a bunch of failed fishermen whose very problems led them to a life-changing meeting with Jesus. Their names were Simon, James, and John, and they ran 2 fishing boats on the great big lake called Gennesaret, or what we would call the Sea of Galilee. And here's their story as Luke tells it in the 5th chapter of his gospel. One day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, with the people crowding around him and listening to the word of God, he saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. Okay, it starts off with Simon Peter and his partners leaving their empty boats to wash out their nets. Because they don't seem to be in a hurry and are just cleaning up, Jesus is able to hitch a ride on Simon's boat so he can push out from shore and use it as a pulpit to address the crowd. That'd be kind of fun, wouldn't it? Back many years ago when I was pastor up in Chisholm, Minnesota, there's a lake right in town not far from the church. And the pastor before me had established a custom of taking one Sunday off and moving the church service down to the lake shore. And when he started out, the church folks even secured a boat for him and put him in the boat and rowed him out so he could preach from the boat to the crowds on the shore just like Jesus. By the time I got there, they still had the lakeside service, but they got tired of hauling the boat out, so they just had me preach from the deck in somebody's yard nearby. Wasn't quite the same. But the real thing to notice in our story of Peter and Jesus is that these three hard-working fishermen seem to have a lot of time on their hands. Enough time that they can row Jesus out and sit there while he taught the people. And soon we see why. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." But Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." Simon can row Jesus about because he is a failure. He and his partners worked their tails off with nothing to show for it. Nothing, zip, nada. Like me in Alaska, they put all their fishing expertise to use and they came up with empty nets. They were failures. Have you been there? Have you worked your tail off for something only to wind up with nothing to show for it? Have you found yourself struggling to do things that used to come easy for you? Have you felt like somehow life has gotten harder, but you can't figure out why? Have you felt like the fishermen, endlessly throwing out nets, hoping to catch a break, hoping to find some new blessing, hoping to take care of your family, but always coming up empty?